For highlights of valuable use cases, community experiments, and developments that unlock scale, adoption, and transformation in the blockchain industry, please welcome co-founder of blockchain at Microsoft, Yorke Rhodes.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, Ethereal. Hello, my queen. So it's always great to follow lawyers. No, I'm not going to do any lawyer jokes. Aaron Wright and I go back a long time, and it's amazing to see lawyers talking about technology. So that's all good by me. So I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey this morning, and sort of give you a sense of where I think we are in this journey. I'm pretty positive about where we are, so just fair warning, and take you a little bit on sort of my journey and Microsoft's journey, starting back in 2015. But before I do that, I actually want to just touch on one important thing, which is this thing called the internet. And you know, whenever people start talks like this, you're like, oh my God, he's going to start in 1975 and bore the hell out of us for the next 10 minutes. But let me sort of fast forward a little bit to 1995. So 20 years into the future. Some interesting things happened in 1995. For those people that weren't around, obviously the 90s was the very similar era of where we are now in blockchain. Which is people were discovering blockchain, people were discovering the internet at the time. Companies didn't know why they wanted to be on the internet even when it was possible to be on the internet. And consumers really didn't know why they wanted to be on the internet either, because there was really nothing on the internet for consumers. So in 1995, this really interesting thing happened, and it happened to actually, sort of be coincident with things that Microsoft was doing in this space, when this thing called Windows 95 happened. It was actually in 1995. And the most prescient thing that happened in 1995 with Windows 95 was that Microsoft decided to not have the default networking stack be the dominant enterprise stack at the time, which was NetWare from a company called Novell. Probably don't know any of those words. But Microsoft decided that they were going to make TCP/IP, the protocol of the internet, be the default networking protocol within Windows 95. So Windows 95 as a consumer operating system shipped to consumers. Consumers now had the ability to effectively be on the web, again, whether they cared about it or not. So my thesis is that we're sort of at that moment in time. The technology is there. Consumers may not care. Enterprises may not know why they care. But everybody's sort of churning through all of the great work that the startups are doing, that we're working with, including some of the ones that you've seen here this weekend. And so basically, people ran to the store and they said, oh my God, I can be on Web 2. No, they didn't, right? They actually had no idea what Web 2 was, right? So it's sort of an important similar place that we are now. Like, does anybody know what Web 3 is? Does anyone really care what Web 3 is? Well, that's blockchain technology, right? So do people care about blockchain? Yes. Do people care about crypto? Yes, right? Why do they care about crypto? Why do they care about blockchain? Do we even know why we care, right? And so 95% of the population doesn't really know, right? So this is the same thing that happened with the internet. But there are some technologies that are actually making the Web3 stack accessible to consumers. So we're at this tipping point, in my view, in 2019, where mass-produced technology products and companies are coming to market with capability in them, whether or not consumers care about it, because those corporations have made smart decisions. So Samsung is a great example of that. Samsung has a huge worldwide population of users, and the S10 actually has a Web3 crypto wallet in it. Now, I have problems that we call it crypto wallets. It's one of those default words, like, why do I need a crypto wallet as a consumer? Well, you need a Web3 wallet, right? And so a crypto wallet's a Web3 wallet. And so that's actually a big, big deal from a tipping point perspective. Prior to this, there were some nascent mobile technology companies that actually had done this, but nobody knew the names of those companies. So now when you have a company like Samsung with massive market share and people are going to go out and buy the S10, in droves. Now you've got people who are actually there, consumers who are there, and then people will build for that. So there's an important tipping point happening. The other side of this, obviously, is we need application stacks, whether they're browsers or mobile application stacks, and Opera is actually leading the way here as a relatively well-known, although small market share browser company. They built, similarly, a Web3 wallet or a crypto wallet into their browser. It's actually the one I've been using for the last couple of months because not having the Samsung S10 phone yet, I'm still on S9, which I only bought like 9 months ago. So I'm trying to justify the upgrade. The Opera browser was very accessible, and what I found was that the onboarding experience into Web3 through the Opera browser was actually quite painless. And that is a really important thing as we look at how do these technologies get in the hands of consumers. The other vector that Opera will drive is based on the Chromium standard, or quote-unquote standard, that Microsoft Edge is now also based on, and all the other browsers pretty much are based on that same standard. This is going to drive us to every other browser manufacturer saying, hey, I got to do that too. Right? So once you got all the browsers on board and you got mobile devices on board, well, now you've got consumers, right? Consumers drive enterprise and application developer behavior. So those are really important tipping points on this journey. And then you have interesting other tipping points that are happening, which is, this is actually in Rockefeller Center. You come up the escalator from the subway, and you hit a bookshelf that's basically full of books about blockchain. This is like zeitgeist type of stuff, right? It's starting to get past, hey, I really want crypto, to blockchain is interesting. What is this thing, right? It's in some ways you might say like the internet, right, is now the blockchain, right? In terms of how people might start to think about that in an n number of years. So this actually is an interesting time of year for Microsoft as well, not just because of New York City Blockchain Week, but we have our developer conference every year, usually in April or May. And for Microsoft, which is a fairly large corporation, you might have heard of it, we have about 9 million developers that we address as basically customers of Microsoft developer tools. So 9 million developers is pretty large, right, compared to the hundreds of thousands of developers in the blockchain ecosystem, right? So this is another tipping point where we can, as an enterprise, really create leverage to help those 9 million developers actually get onboarded into how to do development in a Web3 world. So we had, and I'll go through this a little bit, over the past couple years since I started our journey, and Microsoft started our journey in 2015, that's 4 years ago for anyone who's counting, we actually had some pretty good presence this year. If anyone knows who Virgil Griffith is, he's on the Ethereum Foundation. He was actually at our developer conference because of some of the work we're doing with the Ethereum Foundation. And so let me go back to this question, like, when can, first of all, consumers will never celebrate being on a Web3 stack, but when? Right? When does it matter to them? Besides like the technical foundation, it matters when they can do things like essentially order a coffee through a mobile app, right? That's when it matters to them. It doesn't really matter to them that the technology is there yet, right? So there's still work to do on the application side, but it's one of the things that we really do at Microsoft. And let me just take you very quickly through our journey, just through some PR stuff that you've seen. This is November 2015. This is our first public announcement about work we were doing in blockchain. It happened at DevCon 0. We announced something called blockchain as a service, which is a completely overused term. It wasn't a service, but it was blockchain. In early 2016, we actually launched a Visual Studio plugin for Solidity, along with Vitalik and Andrew Keys and the Consensus folks. And that other gentleman in the middle there is Satya Nadella, who's the CEO of Microsoft. So in 2016 and 2015, the Microsoft executives from the CEO down were well aware of what was going on in the work that we were doing in blockchain, but it takes a little time, right, as an enterprise. So I'm just going to use the Build Developers Conference. Again, that number is wrong, actually. Michael Del Castillo, who published this article at CoinDesk, he's now at Forbes. I told him like the day after he published it that that's 9 million, not 3 million, just so the number is wrong. It's probably more than 9 million at this point. I'll skip a couple of years. After we got organized in 2016, We didn't have any huge announcements in 2017. So 2018, we started to get to some more capabilities. I don't know if anyone knows the HODL, BUILDL, SAFL, type of terminology. I just modified the screenshots there a little bit. This is the CTO of Azure. So basically, the guy who's the chief technologist for our cloud business in 2018 started actually talking about this in depth in his talks at Microsoft to these 9 million developers. And it's interesting because in his journey of learning, he started out where almost everyone starts out, which is like this thing called Bitcoin, which created awareness of digital uniqueness. So he actually used to spend a lot of time talking about that, and we're like, yeah, that's the boring part, Mark. You need to get past that and start talking about actual real application development on other platforms besides Bitcoin. So people were writing about this obviously in 2018. 2019, actually, this year, actually just earlier this week, the Microsoft Build Conference. We had some great presentations, a ton of stuff that's been shipped to market. If you're interested in finding it, just go search for Microsoft Blockchain. You'll see some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about a little bit as we continue this talk. But one of the great things that we did because of the work we're doing with the Ethereum Foundation is we actually had Vitalik come back 2 years later to the Microsoft Build Conference and actually get on stage with Mark Russinovich, our CTO of Azure, and do some demos, do some talks like this particular one, just around how we're collaborating together in the ecosystem. So from a Microsoft perspective and sort of my perspective, how I justify my work at a large enterprise in the blockchain space is we're really trying to help enterprises cross this chasm, right? This unknown thing that they're scared of, just like people were scared of the internet in the mid-90s. So we did some announcements with Starbucks this week. The Starbucks announcement actually was specifically about coffee provenance, so bean to cup, verifying that your Ethiopian coffee was actually grown in Ethiopia by a farmer, potentially being able to tip the farmers and things like that, so to the extent that you want to. And we've done a bunch of work across different industries, a couple of different ones in the airline space, both on the consumer loyalty side with Singapore Airlines as well as on the cargo side. And these are just some really brief samples to give you a sense. I spend a great deal of time in the humanitarian sector, so both on the identity side as well as on the blockchain side. And this was actually a recent event that I participated in called the Blockchain for Social Good Summit with about 22 other NGOs exploring how blockchain is interesting for what they're trying to achieve in their mission. And then this week as well, we made a big announcement with JP Morgan, specifically about Quorum, which is the blockchain stack. That's an Ethereum stack. And basically, Quorum is also a huge enterprise customer of Microsoft, so it made a lot of sense for Microsoft to do a great deal of work with JP Morgan. They've got a lot of internal enterprise stuff that they're doing in addition to the blockchain team specifically there as well. And if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see sometimes I get into arguments with people, nice arguments. But this goes back to the point, like people often say, like, well, what's going on? This, blockchain is crazy. You heard John Wolpert yesterday. Oh, here he is, talking about the mainnet, which philosophically I agree with, right? Like if you do enterprise consortium blockchain, it's fundamentally not as decentralized as something like the Ethereum mainnet. But it also is a way to help enterprises cross the chasm, right? So back to my justification, right? You have to sort of walk large conservative enterprises across the chasm. And in fact, great examples are companies like Ernst & Young and Microsoft. Although Microsoft likes to be a disruptor in technology, they're both fundamentally large conservative organizations, right? So the fact that they're doing the things that they're doing in the blockchain space and embracing this amorphous concept of decentralization is actually quite important as a metric of a tipping point. And as I said, we've been doing this for quite some time. This is an example of another very conservative humanitarian-focused organization called the World Bank. Some colleagues are here from the World Bank. I don't know if they're in the room right now. But last year, the World Bank launched a blockchain bond. This is a bond that was registered on blockchain, actually an Ethereum blockchain, in a private consortium type of network with a partner, the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, and basically registered, bid for positions, and had investors fund a position on the bond which has a term of 2 years. This project is actually going through a version upgrade. So we have a digital bond going through a version upgrade. That's kind of a weird thing to say, right? Like the technology is pervading every single industry, right? So the version upgrade on a digital bond right now is basically to provide secondary trading capability so that anyone who invested, oh, there's my World Bank colleague in the back. Thanks for coming. Anyone who invested in the original position of the bond last August, say I bought $20 million out of this $80 million bond, I can now liquidate that position by selling it to someone else. So they're calling it secondary market trading, but in some sense, it's also exchange-like capability, right? It's not an open exchange, but it is effectively the capability you need for an exchange. And this is my colleague who's on the Treasury, Therese Couture. We spoke at Davos earlier this year. We also do like fun stuff like partner with all of the amazing startups that are here at Ethereal, including, you heard earlier, the Gitcoin hackathon that we just participated in. I threw this up on the screen because it's really interesting that Microsoft's logo is 5 words from the word 2500 DAI, right? That to me is like a really interesting concept that sort of gets you where we're thinking about what's interesting in the world today. And the reason I pushed to participate in this project was exactly for that reason. Not because I wanted you guys to see it. I wanted Microsoft people to see it and start questioning it. Like, what are we doing here? I need to look at that more. What is a DAI, right? And so, we do these projects for business reasons, but also to push the envelope. And as you're thinking about adopting new technology in your lives and in your corporations, you want to think in the same way, right? Think about, how do I use levers inside of my enterprise to actually drive the right type of thinking and the right type of exposure. We also, through the Gitcoin work, we've started getting amazing exposure internally, not just on our engineering team, but beyond that, to this concept of tokens and specifically this type of token, which is a Gitcoin kudos, for example. And this is basically my completed chart. I don't know if anyone else completed their scavenger hunt. So I am in the finals for that. And then I just took a picture of, you saw Cale Teeter on the stage earlier, my colleague. Cale was the first full-time employee that I pulled into the blockchain space. I basically had to talk to his manager and say, I need that guy doing this. Cale's been amazing. So when he set up the Xbox, I don't know if you can see the license plate. I thought that was cool. And then you have some of our other partners here, like MythX, that we're working with very closely as well on smart contract security, as an example. Okay, so we're in May 2019. We're almost halfway through the year. As I sort of calibrate my thinking around this being a tipping point year, I really think that we are there in terms of sort of getting beyond the things that are necessary for this to really take off and become sort of something that consumers don't necessarily have to think about, but the development is actually there and the products are actually there. We do have some hurdles that we have to address in not just the crypto category, but also the key and the key management category, because as you can all probably attest to, you're pretty terrible at managing passwords. And keys that have value that might hold the value of your assets or tokens or real estate or your identity. They're pretty important keys, right? So we don't want to be losing passwords the way we do today. I don't know if anyone's ever tried to send a support request to the blockchain to reset their password. Right, okay, doesn't really work too well. So my time is about wrapping up today. I hope you're gonna have a great day. I'm gonna leave you with one question through a picture that I took when I was in London recently. Has nothing to do with Santander, but the guy on the bike had just like this amazing position, and when I saw him, I'm like, this is a question I ask myself every year. In 2 years, when you look back, what will you be able to say you've accomplished? And that's how I actually sort of coach my children. It's how I coach people that I mentor. It's a really easy way to think about, what do I want to do next, right? Because what do I want to do next is kind of a hard question. But if you say, in 2 years, what can I say I've done? That actually flips the question on its head and really starts to make you think about, okay, well, if I got to do something in 2 years that I want to say I've done, then I really got to start working on it now. And so I don't have to answer the question in the same way. So thank you for your time today, and enjoy the rest of the event. I'll be around. Looking forward to seeing everyone. Thank you.